Wow, I love teleport, my friends. Okay, let's begin. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. I've been driving for 5 years, have gone 650,000 miles and somehow managed not to lose my mind in the process. Come one autumn day about a year back and I was given the delivery that would bring me an experience I hadn't thought would exist except in my worst nightmares. I had received a message on my truck's computer to make a multi-stop run from Indianapolis to Duluth, then from Duluth to a town called Ely. The run to Duluth had been no problem with a 2-day trip. The run from Duluth to Ely seemed a bit trickier, what with the quickest, legal, run being Minnesota Route 1 from Minnesota 61. It was that certain kind of night where everything was shrouded in darkness, the moon was covered by the clouds and a winter storm was on the horizon, making the air even colder than it already was. I figured that I deserved a nice warm cup of coffee after this drive was over. The drive along 61 was uneventful with only a couple of cars and semi-tractors on the road this late into the night. The radio was calling for a light forecast of hazy rain with a relatively thick fog until that afternoon. All the more reason to get this run finished, I supposed. Sometime along Route 1, my trailer began shaking violently with my truck having difficulty in pulling along a flat line of grass. I noticed one of my tires on my trailer had ruptured. Annoyed with losing time, I pulled into a small grove and parked along the worn dirt path facing the highway. To the rear of my tractor was a thick bundle of northern forest that likely hadn't seen human tracks in decades. A quiet wind washed over me as I relayed a breakdown message to my company, receiving another that a tow wouldn't be out until the morning. No problem, I've got a fridge full of food and a satellite for TV. Several hours passed as I laid in my bed. A windstorm woke me up as I tossed and turned to gain my bearings. That wasn't winding I was hearing. The best I can describe it is the sound of metal sliding against metal, like the brakes of a locomotive. The noise was some distance away, roughly a quarter mile to the rear if I had to guess. The noise was getting closer, more to the left of my truck, somewhat about the front of the trailer. I could hear what sounded like tapping fingers or claws against my trailer. The sound of hoof steps marching through the thick grass alerted me to the fact that this may be just a harmless animal, wishing to take a look and ease my nerves. I slid the curtains open and came face to back with the stuff of nightmares. The antlers reached to the top of my truck's windows. The creature brandishing them was a hunched-over, bipedal mass of skin and bones with the skull of some deer or elk. Fearfully, I turned the searchlights on to get a better look at the thing in question and to hopefully frighten it off. I wish I hadn't. The light itself hadn't alerted the creature, but me moving in the truck had set it into a hunched-over stance, keeping an ear open for some form of prey, I presumed. I noticed empty eye sockets that seemed to go on forever that slotted into the ancient skull of some sort of deer or elk. I was afraid of turning the key in fear of rousing this monster's predatory hunger. It looked near starvation, as though it had been years since it last ate. I sat and waited. It was near 5 o'clock. The tow wouldn't come to work until around 7. A buck, roughly a 10-pointer, meandered into the field before spotting the creature in question. This thing has to have some great hearing since it didn't see the deer wander across its sightlines. It was blind, had to have been. Moments passed before the buck began chomping on berries from a nearby bush. The blind monster heard the sounds and pounced. From 15 feet it took all but 5 seconds for the buck to have been gutted and torn apart. The creature didn't seem to want the buck for food, more or less rather for twisted enjoyment. I had seen enough. Turning the engine over, The monster looked in my general direction and roared threateningly as it rushed to make contact with my truck. I managed to pull forward just enough that it made contact with the trailer instead. The trailer lifted up a few inches as the sound of bending metal embedded itself into my ears. Shifting from third to fifth and continuing to 10, the creature was still in the chase until I crossed over a hill. Looking back through my mirrors, the monster was gone. I pulled off and got out. The sounds of scraping metal were far and away, replaced by the quiet rustling of trees. I continued driving again, until I came upon an area that trucks could park in, well lit and asphalt. Much better and safer than the grove from earlier. Afternoon came and I went to inspect the damage from last night's incident done to my trailer. Claw marks etched into the driver's side of the trailer went on for the whole length of 53 feet. A massive dent roughly 2 feet from the truck itself reminded me that I wasn't just fortunate to be alive, I was damn lucky. The delivery went off without complication since the tow only had to change a tire and I went home several days later. The creature's still on my mind. I went online to figure out, bluntly, whatever the hell it was. The skull of a deer and possible bloodlust for people brought me to several conclusions. The most effective that I was either losing my mind in the mountains or that I had come face to face with an American Indian folklore nightmare known as the Wendigo, essentially what becomes of you if you cannibalize on human flesh. I've no plans on stopping on Route 1 overnight again. Talks with the locals included everything from ghosts to, of course, that same Wendigo I had encountered. I went on Route 1 again last week. The sounds of scraping metal were heard once more and I saw a shadow move across the forest at a blistering speed. I noticed that it didn't get too close this time, just close enough to see the fog from its breath. It knows who I am. It's just waiting for me to let down my guard.